Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm very short of time today, so this one isn't going to be wonderfully edited and all this other kind of stuff. I'm just kind of shooting this video because I think it's something that is great for you guys to see, especially if you're having an engine rebuilt or you're considering a cam swap while you're doing a basic engine rebuild sort of thing, especially if there has been head work done by others. So stick around. I'm going to show you a quick little tech tip on something that should be done to verify that your engine rebuild or your cam swap is going to be safe for the engine. Okay, now if we go back a little while, you may remember if you go back and look at some engine teardown videos, I believe the title of the last video that I did on this particular engine was The Luckiest Man Alive. This is an Evo rebuild that we're doing. It actually started out as just a case swap, and when we tore it down, we found that one of the lifters, you guys may remember, the rollers, the bearings just fell out in my hand. So he was this close to that lifter exploding and more than likely destroying the whole entire engine. Catastrophic failure sort of thing. So look for that video, The Luckiest Man Alive, and you'll see me tearing down Brian from Ohio, a buddy of mine, and you'll see me tearing that engine down, and that'll kind of get you up to speed where we're at. So once I started looking into it, I realized that one of the cam lobes where that lifter was, it was the rear intake if I recall correctly, it was a while back, that it had actually wiped that cam lobe a bit and made it unsuitable to use. That being said, we had to change camshaft. Now the cam that he was running in this engine was a fairly aggressive 600 some lift, but it was that cam is not available to purchase anymore. So what we did was we found a cam, somebody pulling up, we found a cam that was relatively close, that would work well with the head porting that he had done previously. And so what we ended up landing on was an S&S 600. It's a very close in overlap, it's very close in duration, and it's relatively close on total lift, where one of the and so that's going to complement the valve sizes and the head porting he had done and that sort of thing, and not change the performance of the bike too much from what he had. Now, one of the things about that S&S cam is that the TDC lifts are quite a bit higher than that cam that he originally had in there. So then I'm going to ask you to go back and reference the video that I did. It's probably been a year ago on, you know, I like putting my videos into practice and bringing things back full circle, right, for you guys. So I did a video that it was Your Cam Can Destroy Your Engine. Okay, and I think I did that one about a year ago. And yeah, it was Your Cam Could Destroy Your Engine. And then I went over to the whiteboard and explained TDC lifts and, you know, and all that other kind of stuff, the different cycles of the 4-stroke and everything, to explain how a change in cam spec or a change in cam, if you've had work done, could potentially destroy the engine. So if you go back and watch those two videos, this is a culmination. Again, we're putting into practice the things that we teach you guys. We don't just talk about this stuff, we actually do this stuff. So I'm going to tilt the camera down and let you see the head, and then it'll better explain exactly what I'm doing. You'll have to excuse the mess on my workbench, guys. I'm doing a whole lot of different things all at one time here. So basically, with that S&S 600 cam, one of the things we're dealing with, let me roll this back just a little bit, is again a higher TDC lift, primarily on the intake. Now, what we have on the intake is 192 thousandths TDC lift on the intake and 184 thousandths TDC lift on the exhaust. Now, if again you watch that video, you'll understand at TDC of the exhaust stroke is the point that both valves are off the seat. That's a bit of your overlap there. So we need to make sure that at those TDC lifts that we have proper clearance valve to valve so they don't crash into each other. Okay, so one of the ways that we do that is, you know, this is a checking fixture essentially, and we put these small checking springs in. They're just a very lightweight spring that allows us to do this without having to use a full spring. So what we're going to do is bring this indicator, and these indicators are half thousandths indicators. Make sure I'm not in the frame here, and we're going to touch it just to the point that it moves. and dial it in. That's going to give us 0. And we're going to be on the seat with both valves. Now, I have already decarboned these heads. I've cleaned up the valve seats. And the seats and the valves are in such good condition that really all I had to do was clean them up, and then I just hand lapped them in. And we've got a great valve seal. And if you also watch the video on the Evo head rebuild, very similar, where we had checked the valve stem, the guide clearance, and all that type of stuff. So the head itself is in great condition. And after cleanup and all that. And then we also checked the valve springs, if you remember, made sure the seat pressures were right. So everything's been checked. This isn't just a tear down, clean it up, and put it back together. The other thing you'll remember is when I did the tear down, I suspected that we had a valve stem seal leak, as I saw, you know, what I saw on the ports and such. So we're also putting new valve stem seals on it. And so anyway, back to what we're doing. So we're on the intake side here, and I'm dialing that in at 192 thousandths. So we have 50, 100, 150, 60, 70, 80, 90. There's our 192 thousandths, and that intake valve is open. Now let's do the exhaust. Touch it off. We're zeroed in. This was at 184, so we have 50, 100, 50, 60, 70, 80. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, this is the position of basically the entire engine cycle where the valves will be close enough, or they're at their closest point together. So now we can flip it over, and we can see that both valves are off the seat, right? And I get to measure this distance. Now, let me talk about a couple of things. There are several things that can affect that measurement, all right? First off, if we got in here and I found that, oh crap, these valves are too close together. Now, I'm going to give you the number. A lot of builders will use as tight as 20 and 30 thousandths of an inch valve-to-valve clearance. Me personally, I believe that's a little too tight. I'm not saying that anybody else is wrong. I just like to build in a little bit of margin, right? There's a lot of different ways to do it. Now, on my personal engines, like on my FXR, that, you know, the billet head deal I'm doing, that's a big valve motor. It's an inch 990 intake, inch 710 on the exhaust. Those valves are going to be very, very, very close together. I think I'm going to be somewhere around 20 thousandths. And that's really close. But I'm also running a very heavy-duty spring, which is going to reduce my chance of valve float. So the reason you want a little extra clearance, or the reason I like to dial in a little extra clearance at around 50 to 60 thousandths, is in case anything can happen, right? If you know, you hit the rev limiter or whatever, you bounce a valve, the spring goes a little weak, something like that. I want a little bit of extra room so that the valves won't hit each other. And I have torn quite a few engines down that had 20 to 30 thousandths and seen where the valves have kissed each other. Not enough to bend the valve, but you could see witness marks along the perimeter. So that led me to basically double the distance. Now, the way you can increase that distance is by sinking the valves further into the head when you do the valve job. That moves them further apart. The problem with that is you have to then look at your valve stem lengths and your valve stem protrusions. Remember, we have a fixed rocker position on these heads. And the more valve stem protrusion you have, the more of an angle you put on that rocker arm, which will then side load the valve stem and cause premature wear. Best case scenario, cause premature wear on the valve stem and the guide, elongate it a bit, and then you start having valve stem seal leaks and all that type of stuff. So those are things we have to keep in mind. Now, you can also excuse me, you can also grind that valve stem down a little bit to pick up a little extra. The only issue with that is now your retainer is closer to the top, and you could have clearance issues between your retainer and your rocker arm at the valve tip. So there's all kind of things to consider when you're making modifications to fit work that has been previously done. But as you know, Brian told me, don't compromise, man. Just do what you got to do to make it right. So fortunately, we got a good set of heads here. The seats look good. The valves look good. Our valve stem protrusions, we've got plenty of room there. But what I'm hoping, because the seat is good and the valve is good, I really don't want to have to do a valve job on this thing. If I have to, I have to. So now let's measure it. And remember what I'm looking for. I want to see at least 50 thousandths. 60 would be ideal. But for me personally, 50 is more than enough, considering it could be built with 20 or 30. Now, there's another thing that you have to remember. While an engine is under operation, it's all the parts and pieces are seeing a bit of dynamic compression, okay? When the engine is operating, the lifters will collapse a little bit. The push rods will collapse a little bit or shrink a little bit under compression. Your rocker arms are going to flex just a little bit. And so when you start adding all those numbers up, you're going to gain a few thousandths. The other thing that will happen with heat, the engine is going to grow. Well, if the engine grows, you've now created more distance, right? Because you're effectively, your head or your rocker arm is a little bit further away from the case. Remember, we're working in very small numbers here, right? 3 and 4 zeros to the right of a decimal point, okay? So when you add all those up, that 20 to 30 thou could actually grow to 40 possibly, maybe even 50, depending on what type of push rod you're using. So if I have a minimum of 50 thousandths valve to valve, I am considering all that, thermal expansion, the dynamic compression, and I think of all these things. If I've got a minimum of 50 thousandths, I know I'm going to be okay, and we can run that S&S 600 cam, and I don't have to do any more valve work, and Brian will be good to go. So what I've got here is a gauge block. These are incredibly precise, precision ground, okay, and I consider this to be like a go, no-go gauge is basically what it is. I know it's 50 thousandths, but I'm going to check it to be sure. Yes, it's exactly 50 thousandths. And let's go back to the head. So we can see both are off the seat, right? And I can easily slide this 50 thousandths gauge in here with plenty of wiggle room. And I can tell you that's another 10 to 15 thousandths I have in there. Yeah, that's 10 to 15 thousandths extra. So I'm at 60 to 65 thousandths, give or take, knowing that I have plenty of room valve to valve. And of course, I've also checked his valve stem protrusion and all that type of stuff. The spec for that on twin cam and Evo is really around 2-inch to 2-inch 50 thousandths. I definitely don't like to go more than 2-inch 50, but 2-inch is good, right? When you change that valve stem protrusion, you're also changing your spring seat pressures, okay? So then you have to think about shimming and all that type of stuff. But looking at where his valve stem protrusions are, they're just, I don't remember the exact numbers, they're just beyond 2-inch. They were somewhere between 2-inch and 2-inch 15 thou, pretty close to that. And with checking the springs, retainers, we're not going to need to run any spacers or shims underneath the spring to get his seat pressures right. We'll just run the lower seat retainer in the head, and he'll be good to go. So, quick tech tip on changing cams. Be sure to go back and look at those other 2 videos, and this stuff will make a lot more sense to you. And looks like this S&S 600 is going to work great for these heads. And hopefully we're going to be doing another video here very soon. I've got to get the cases together. We've checked out his flywheels. They're fantastic. We finally got all of our parts. We got lifters and all that. The pistons and the cylinders were okay. So we're just going to clean them up and put that girl back together there, drop his new lifters in, and Brian will be good to go. So guys, thanks a million for watching. Thank you so much to our members that support this channel every month. I appreciate you guys. Thanks to all the subscribers. Remember, I have a goal. December 31st is my birthday. On December 31st, I would love for us to be able to have 100,000 subscribers. We're getting close to 60. I think we can do it. Take care of yourselves and each other. Have a good one.